Do you feel disconnected from yourself and lost after having been in a toxic relationship, like you don't know who you are anymore? Today I'll explain why that is and why you've probably never known your identity or trusted yourself in relationships, and I'll go through how to turn that around so you feel connected to yourself and fully embodied in your identity. I felt completely lost within myself after experiencing the confusing, gaslighting, manipulative landscape of toxic relationships, and I just didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my needs were, what my preferences were, let alone being able to communicate them. I use the strategies in this lesson to rebuild a connection with myself from the ground up, and now my relationship to myself is the most strong and most important relationship I have in my life. And if you want to achieve that kind of relationship to yourself, this is the work that I do with my clients. I'd love to speak with you and help guide you on the next stage of your journey. Just book a call with me. The link to my calendar is in the description below. Toxic relationships are very confusing, very demanding on our time and energy, and they really pull us away from ourselves. They require us to not be in alignment with who we actually are. And it means that the longer you stay in the relationship, the more you lose yourself. And if you have any kind of CPTSD, which is your relationships from childhood that cause complex trauma, you've never known yourself that well at all, because that trauma started from very early and that blocked you from developing a relationship to yourself. Now, why is this? Relationships are literally mirrors to develop our self-identity. Our external relationships inform the mirror of the relationship we have with ourselves. So we can't develop in a vacuum. It's actually a primal need that we have of connection in order to survive. And part of this is the identity piece. When our brains develop, we develop this self-identity. So in childhood, secure attachment depends on caregivers attuning to us, meeting our needs most of the time, being sensitive to changes in our emotional landscape, and that all allows us to feel safe in our body. And when we feel big, strong emotions, we're able to then express them and move through them and kind of complete the cycle. But if caregivers aren't attuned to you enough of the time, or if there's a significant abandonment there and you're felt alone most of the time and you perceive abandonment, your relationship to yourself is not able to develop because you aren't able to learn those basic emotional processing skills in the absence of another healthy, safe system to help you process and move through those emotional events. And so because of that, you then start to override yourself in order to get connection, because connection is scarce in an environment like that. That overrides your connection to yourself, right? Connection becomes more essential to your survival than authenticity and you expressing and being yourself authentically. So when we're valuing connection over authenticity as a child or an adult, we are externally wired to always seek connection, right? We have this unstable, insecure attachment within ourselves and to others, and that comes from this unstable, uncertain environment that we had when we were a child, and we then replicate that in our adult relationships because that's how our body is wired to think that is love, right? And in that situation, connection is scarce, the insecure attachment develops, and there's this real sense of scarcity around love, right? There's never going to be enough for me, so I need to keep getting it. And this actually feeds into other maladaptive behaviors like addictions, overeating, alcohol, drinking to excess, these kinds of ways that we self-soothe, this kind of gaping hole within us that feels there's never enough love, right? Some traditions call that the hungry ghost. I call it the core wound, or the abandonment wound, or the wounded inner child that feels she never got the love that she needs. And we need to keep kind of filling that hole with all these other things rather than healthy, intimate love, because we don't know how to create that. We weren't raised in an environment like that. So as I said, we often carry this dynamic into our adult relationships because we were wired that way from childhood. So we choose relationships that replicate the similar dynamic we had with our earlier caregivers. So if we had a caregiver that was emotionally absent or unavailable or neglectful most of the time, we will tend to find ourselves attracted to people that are also emotionally absent or neglectful or are emotionally unavailable, because we're used to that internal chase. We actually think that activation in our body is love when it's actually simply anxiety or anxious attachment. Now, the quality of relationships that we choose has a direct correlation to the quality of relationship that we have with ourselves. And so when we're constantly in this state, seeking external connection, we're never actually getting a chance to develop a connection within ourselves because we're in this external state, right? And we actually disconnect from a large portion of ourselves, of our body, of our needs, because we're constantly in sort of this survival state. And disconnection, dissociation is a survival mechanism in order to function in the world. And our nervous system, our body grows up around this thinking that this is normal, but it becomes a filter that we actually see the whole world through. And as someone that's walked this, I can't tell you how pervasive this filter was for me and how this showed up in all areas of my life. I just thought everyone experienced the world like this until I learned how to reconnect to myself, and I realized that that's not the case. So how do you go about reconnecting to yourself? When you're in this external state, when you're constantly seeking external validation and connection and having this kind of experience of love being extremely scarce and you're needing to kind of like chase it all the time, you have a metaphorical wall standing between you and your true self within you, right? Your true self does exist within you, but this wall is a whole wall of unprocessed emotions, energy, and trauma that's actually living in your body, that's keeping you from developing a healthy relationship to your natural state of being. Now, you may not be aware of this at all. Often when I speak to people on calls, they don't have a connection to their body or a connection to their trauma. That's perfectly normal. Remember, the disconnection is actually a survival mechanism. It's a very intelligent way that your body has operated to keep you safe. But it is also stopping us from having a healthy relationship to ourselves and, of course, others. So symptoms that this is going on between you with this wall is that you are always doing things, right? Like you're always in go-go mode, or you are in fight-flight, right? You get triggered easily, you might cry at the drop of a hat, and you might have this kind of underlying pervasive feeling that you're running from something, or you're afraid of what's actually underneath inside you. A big sign that this is going on in you is that you have these unhealthy patterns that keep recurring in your romantic relationships. All other areas of your life might be great, but when it comes to healthy intimacy, relationships just don't work for you. And you might have this sense of feeling lost, or just of not knowing who you truly are. That's the sign that you've kind of got this internal wall of unprocessed emotions and trauma that needs to be processed in order for you to reconnect. So reconnection happens by processing what is in the way, right? And if you've watched my channel enough, you'll know that obviously we go to therapy and we talk about it and we journal about it and we read and we write about it. Those are top-down modalities, cognitive-based modalities that work to a degree to help you understand and create meaning and reorganize things in your mind. But the actual core wounds live in the body, and so that's only going to work so far for you. Trauma is stored in the body, and this is where the bulk of your core wounds and your abandonment kind of energy is frozen and lies and is stopping you from having a relationship to yourself. So we have to start with healing from the level of the body, right? Now, I don't want to go into complex kind of concepts around this. There is lots of different somatic work that people do try, but not all of it really addresses the core wounds that cause these disconnections between our, trauma identity and our real identity. So I just want to give you a really simple tool that you can start using today, so you can really get to the core of the wound and to start turning it around and healing it. And that skill is literally just to hold space for the uncomfortable, more intense energies and emotions that are in your body. And it's going to be a little bit confusing, and if you start to connect to it and you can't put your finger on it or words on it, because a lot of these core wounds in our body are actually non-verbal, which means they formed and were lodged in the body before we had the ability to speak properly, right? They often happen when we're very young and our brains haven't developed enough to have kind of cognition around it, which is another reason why top-down or cognitive modalities fall short of clearing all of the wounded energy. So lean into feeling and dropping into these stronger emotions. Now, there's a caveat to this. You have a window of tolerance. I don't want you to blow out your window of tolerance and overwhelm yourself with deep, dark emotions, right? Do this with a friend or a coach or a therapist if you need to, but we do need to start feeling and dropping into the emotions that we're carrying that we've been avoiding for so long. And we need to do that without judgment. We need to do that with caring and love, as if they were scared, naive, afraid little child in our body, because effectively that is the energetic imprint we have in our body of when we first sensed abandonment. That's what we're carrying, which is why when we have these patterns, we can often regress into a younger version of ourselves, because that nervous system imprint is in the body and flares up when we get triggered, right? That's the actual age of the core wound. So we need to allow and hold space for it, as if we were a parent holding space for a scared young child, which is what we needed when we were young and didn't get. We can now give that to ourselves through this process of reparenting. And if we do that well in a safe way, what will happen is a release, which is where we'll feel a rise up of emotion in the body and we're able to grieve that wound, right? And there's this feeling of a release. So another caveat, please stay within your window of tolerance when you do this. If you notice you're touching into an emotion that's overwhelming you and you cry more and more and you're actually spiraling down and it's getting worse, I need you to just stop this technique completely and please go see a professional, go see someone that can help you process this in a way, because this isn't always possible to do in a self-healing context, and it is always recommended to do with someone who knows what they're doing in guiding you. Now, once you've started to do that, what you'll notice is the wall effectively starts to dissolve. You're going to get these little glimmers of you, right? You start to get access to your true self, this authentic part of you. And this is where you start to know a bit more about yourself, right? Start to recognize you're more unique in your identity and how you're different from other people and what your preferences are and what your likes and your dislikes are, okay? Because you've probably up until this point been always trying to get other people on board with you, and you're externally motivated and you're always liking what other people like, but this is actually all coming from within you now. And you're also going to start experiencing a reconnection to your body and your body's signals. Now, the body keeps the score, it holds our trauma, but when we start to clear the trauma from the body, it also becomes really apparent that our bodies are incredibly intelligent, right? The non-verbal body-based intelligence around what our bodies tell us in terms of our intuition, right? What our preferences are, our gut instinct, whether someone is or isn't right for us, is incredibly intelligent. So when this wall starts to dissolve, you'll get access to that intelligence and you'll start to notice your intuition is louder, right? Knowing what you need to feel loved and what boundaries you need to set. And also another piece in this is what you need in order for your nervous system to feel safe. Often when we've been in this externally motivated state, we've been in fight, flight, our nervous system has been triggered most of the time, and it's kind of like we're turned on all the time in a not good way, in a fight flight way. And when we start to actually feel safe in the body, we start to notice that our nervous system has preferences for safety as well. So this is another sign that you're starting to reconnect to yourself. Now, this process, this tool might seem really unreachable or vague for you, particularly if you're really disconnected from your body, but it is the key way to start. So see how you go about leaning into those emotions and just noticing the effects on allowing yourself to process them, right? Feeling the deeper emotions whilst staying in your window and just allowing the body to grieve and process and release the stored trauma and stored emotions that have been in there for a very long time. And hopefully you'll start to see those glimmers. Those glimmers are going to grow, and more over time, your window of tolerance is going to increase as well. Now, if you want direct help with learning this exact skill, this is exactly what I do with my clients. I'd love to speak with you on a call so I can just chat about how I can best guide you on the next stage of your journey. I have a calendar link in my description below. There are also some next step videos for you to watch so that you can move one step closer to having an incredibly beautiful and whole relationship to yourself and healthy relationships with others. And for now, I'll see you in the next video.